5. Carrying Leif's sword through the streets proved far more difficult than Cal had anticipated. Though they were full of people going about their daily business, something felt off. The usual sidelong glances and whispered comments were still there, but now they carried an extra layer of fear, as though people were scared to come close. More scared. They parted before him as he wandered down the street, as though he carried some contagious disease. Cal told himself it was Leif's sword strapped to his back making them extra nervous, not that they'd ever welcomed his presence on the best of days. Let them look. Let them whisper. He didn't care what they thought of him. Today, their opinions meant less than nothing. They didn't have the courage to stand up against the Davins, but he did, and he would. He would get Ovette back, and then. The thought paused him mid-stride. True to form, he hadn't taken the time to think about what he'd do after getting to Ovette. Shay claimed she could get him to where the Davins were keeping her. But could Shay also get them out? And where would they go after? They'd have to leave the city, of course, which suited Cal fine, as he'd wanted to leave for years. Ovette had agreed, but he suspected she'd just been going along with whatever he said. Now that he thought about it, he didn't have anywhere else to go. Neither of them did. Cal shook his head and grunted to himself, startling a passerby. Thinking about the future could wait until later. Right now, he had to get to Shay and then to Ovette. One step at a time. The sword's weight pressed down against his back. It was heavier than he'd expected it to be, more uncomfortable, too. The prefects wore theirs with ease, as if they weighed nothing, but the makeshift strap he'd fashioned bit into his shoulder. It rubbed through his thin tunic, making his skin raw. He needed to find somewhere to readjust it, somewhere discreet, off the main street. Besides, a hollowborn wandering the main street with a too-big-for-him sword wasn't the smartest idea. If a passing patrol saw him, there'd be no talking his way out of it. New plan. Get off the main street, fix the strap, then. His stomach growled, loud and audible, interrupting his strategizing. He couldn't remember the last time he'd sat down to eat something. Too long, he muttered to himself, his hand rubbing his abdomen. He was close to Bagson's hole in the wall, just a few alley skips away. He wasn't exactly thrilled about seeing Bagson again so soon, but weak and injured as he was, he didn't have much choice. His hand drifted to Ovette's coin pouch, tucked against his chest. He'd come close to leaving it behind, not wanting the temptation to spend what wasn't his. The memory of her being dragged away while he lay helpless in a pool of his own blood surfaced without warning. He'd told her time and time again that he'd always be there to protect her, promising to keep her safe. But when it mattered, when she'd needed him the most, he'd failed. His heartbeat thumped in his ears, his stomach hardening as he recalled her kissing his cheek, whispering she was sorry. He dug his fingers into the pouch's worn fabric. He wouldn't fail her again. Ever. He couldn't. He would keep his promise to her, no matter what. Another gnawing groan in his stomach brought him back into the moment. He shook himself, dispelled the negativity that had been building. He needed to focus on the task at hand. The past was the past. Nothing he could do about it now. He needed to eat. Ovette would understand. Dipping into a nearby alley, Cal navigated his way to Bagson's place. Noise from the patrons inside reached him before he turned to the final corner. A quick peep through one of the small, grimy windows confirmed what he suspected. As always, the establishment overflowed with people drinking away their worries. It didn't matter that the alcohol Bagson served was little more than swill. He was proud of the service he provided to the community. Ovette once claimed Bagson must have been quite the lady killer in his youth, citing his strong jaw and the thick black mane that framed his face. But Cal couldn't see it. To him, Bagson looked rough. big bellied and strong armed. A brute that could take on an army by himself. The boom of his voice better suited to battlefield orders than taking drinks. Cal entered through the front this time. It would be quicker that way, and Bagson would understand. He had to. The merriment and jeers from the bar's patrons masked his entrance well enough, and no one noticed him slipping in. And why would they? The rosy, red cheeked patrons were too focused on their cups and spills. Bagson stood behind the bar, rotating a dirty bowl around an equally dirty washcloth while a patron, deep into his cups by the flush on his cheeks, regaled Bagson with his current woe. The exchange garnered no look of passion or deep engagement on Bagson's part, but it was a common sight to see. Everyone brought their problems to Bagson, whether he liked it or not. Cal made his way to the counter and waited for Bagson to catch his eye, earning a deep scowl and a shake of the head for his patience. He gestured to their usual meeting spot out back. The lines around Bagson's eyes deepened. He threw down his washcloth and stomped into what Cal knew to be the kitchen area, ignoring the other patrons. With a sigh of relief, Cal exited and made his way around the building, slinking into the shadows of the alleyway where Bagson waited. The coiled muscles of his thick arms tensed as he watched Cal's approach. "I told you not to come back," Bagson said, his words clipped and brokering no argument. "Bagson, I need your help," Cal said. "Don't care. Answer's no." "But—" "No, Cal." Bagson cut him off. "I want nothing to do with you or that orphanage anymore. You tell Leif I'm sorry, but the prefects nearly trashed the place asking questions about you lot, harassing my customers. I've a right mind to haul you to the coal myself. And don't you even start with the—" "They took Ovette," Cal said, the words slipping out. Bagson's expression crumpled, the angry creases sagging in step with the giant man's shoulder. He scrubbed his hand down his face and let out a weary sigh. "I heard." His eyes flicked to the sword digging into Cal's back. "Plan on getting her back?" "What do you think?" Cal replied. Bagson's gaze swept over Cal, marking the leathers and how he favored his injured side. "Sure you're up for this, boy?" "Never been more sure about anything." "Hmm," he gruffed, straightening to his full, imposing height, looking all the warrior Cal envisioned Bagson had once been, even with the dirty apron. "Got coin?" "Yeah," Cal replied, pulling a few scratched coins out of Ovette's pouch. Scooping up the coins, Bagson walked back inside, returning a few moments later with a small bundle of cloth. "All I can spare," Bagson said. "It'll be enough," Cal replied, tearing into the meager strips of dried meat and bread. Bagson's scrutinizing gaze made Cal feel very small. Eventually, Bagson let up and turned to head back inside. "Tell Leif I'm sorry about what happened." "We're not going back there, but Ovette will want to thank you herself when she comes back." "No, Cal." Bagson's back remained turned. "This is the last time I can help you. Don't come back here again. I mean it. I can't have you bringing any more trouble to my doorstep." Without another word, Bagson slammed the back door shut. Cal's heart sank as the deadbolt clicked into place, the gesture hitting him harder than he expected. He jabbed his fist into the door, clenching his teeth as the pain radiated through his knuckles. "And what do we have here?" A familiar snide voice called out from behind. "Making more trouble? Looking to bring the prefects down on someone else?" Cal turned, greeted by the sight of Jord grinning from ear to ear, flanked, as always, by Din and Teston. "I'm not in the mood today, Jord. Just leave me alone." This was the last person Cal wanted to see, speak to, think about, or even have time to acknowledge. "You see, I would, but I find myself in a precarious position." George stepped forward, activating his brand with a flick of his wrist, the dull red light pooling in his palm. You're disturbing the peace again. And as an upstanding citizen, I feel it is our civic duty to uphold that peace. And we'll start by escorting you to the proper authorities. To his left, Teston's palm pulsed with a similar hue, while Din's fist thrummed with blue light. Back off, Jord, Cal said, drawing Leif's sword from his back. His arms shook as he heaved it against the weight of the blade, bringing it up to eye level. Despite the sword's heft, he tried to imitate what he thought would be a heroic stance. Hands clasped tight around the hilt, shoulders locked, feet apart, back straight, but not too straight. It was all he could do not to stumble forward. George's grin spread even further, the corners of his mouth becoming pointed tips. Ha! Looks a little too big for you. Teston and Din laughed in time with Jord, synced perfectly, obediently. Jord took a step closer. The dull red in his palm ignited into flecks of flame. Cal waited, allowed Jord to get closer, ignored the cackles of the idiots Jord called friends. The moment Jord stepped within a few inches of the blade, Cal made his move. Shifting forward, he raised the sword and jerked against the momentum to bring it back down. He wasn't surprised when Jord stepped out of the way. In fact, he'd hoped he would. The blade clanged against stone, sending up a small plume of red dust into the air. Seeing his moment, Jord lunged forward, palm first. A ball of gift fire, bigger than the last one he'd thrown at Cal, shot forward. Freeing one hand from the sword's hilt, Cal threw his shoulder back and held his breath as the fireball sailed past. Cal pivoted against the weight of the sword and threw his fist into Jord's face. The blow glanced off his chin, enough to send him back a few paces. Stunned, Jord kicked out as he stumbled back, his foot connecting with the hilt's crossguard, driving the pommel into Cal's stomach. The impact shook his legs, and white-hot pain lanced through his stomach, like a hot poker being shoved into his gut. Cal's grip on the sword faltered, but he managed to reorient himself and bring the blade up once more, ignoring the throb of pain even as the sides of his vision began to blur. You'll need more than a toy sword, George spat. He palmed the blade to the side and clasped his hands around the hilt, just above Cal's. The glow of his brand intensified, heating the metal until Cal's palms blistered. Cal willed himself to hang on to the sword, but it was no use. The pain was too intense. With a cry, he released his hold and shook his hands against the flesh searing. George sneered as Cal stumbled back. Not so dangerous after all, right, lads? He flicked his wrist and another ball of gift fire flared to life in his palm. Grinning, his lackeys advanced forward, fanning out to flank Cal. Cal reached behind his back, drew Lady Havisham's dagger, and held it at arm's length. George doubled over, pointing and howling with laughter. Oh, come on, he jeered. What good's that little toothpick going to do? Cal's eyes flicked between Jord and the sword lying at his feet. What, you want this? George said as he scooped up the sword. How about I hold on to it for you, huh? Give it back. Now, Cal spat, growling through the pain in his stomach and the burns on his hand. Come and get it, George sneered, his smile shifting to match. Cal glanced from side to side as Teston and Din edged forward. Outmatched, Cal made the only choice he had left. He ran. Cal sprinted through the back alleys, taking turns at random. His side burned as blood soaked through the bandage, but he couldn't think about that right now. He needed to lose Jord and his thugs and make sure they couldn't follow. Only then could he focus on stitching his stomach back together. There's no use in hiding. We'll find you eventually. Jord's voice echoed off the clay walls, making it impossible to tell where he was. It dawned on Cal that his genius plan of losing his pursuers in this maze of back streets and alleyways had him completely turned around.
Don't you want your sword back?
Cal had to get that sword back. The thought of George's hands around the blade made the muscles in his neck tighten. That sword belonged to Leif, and George wasn't worthy of laying one grubby finger on it.
Come on, Hollowborn. This game has gone on long enough.
Cal took solace in George's growing irritation, evident by his barking orders at Teston and Din. Dagger in hand, Cal turned and used George's voice to guide him back through the maze. Before long, George's disappointment sounded close, just a few lanes ahead. Any other day, Cal would have celebrated getting under George's skin so much. He edged closer to the corner of a nearby wall, poking his head out just enough to get a good view of the alley. George was so close. Close enough for Cal to see the redness in his face and the vein in his neck bulging as he berated his lackeys.
How did you lose him? He's making you look like a fool,
George yelled. Teston didn't look at George, instead choosing to stare at the floor like a naughty child being admonished by a parent, despite being a clear few inches taller than George. Din, on the other hand, was either braver or dumber than his counterpart. His fists shook as George continued his tirade.
What use are you both if you can't even keep track of one stupid Hollowborn, huh?
Sorry, boss, Teston muttered to the ground. His voice was deep, gravelly, but the way he spoke sounded more like it belonged to an oversized child. Din's face scrunched with each big huff of breath, to the clear displeasure of Jord. Cal scanned the alley, his gaze darting from object to object. The thud of his heart grew stronger with each passing moment. His pulse continued to quicken until a glint of metal caught his eye. Leif's sword lay across a couple of barrels that had been discarded and left to rot in the elements just a few paces behind Jord and his friends, but unfortunately, also many paces away from where Cal was crouched.
I'm not interested in your excuses or your apologies. Find him, or you'll be answering to my father,
George snapped.
I don't think your father will care about one Hollowborn,
Din snarled. He towered over Jord, who, to his credit, did not appear intimidated by this behemoth's glare.
What my father thinks is none of your business. You should concern yourself more about doing what I say when I say. Otherwise, I might just have a chat with dear old Daddy and inform him that the two bumbling imbeciles he hired are nothing but hollow lovers.
George snarled.
How is your darling new bride, Din? I hear she's with child. Would be an awfully inconvenient time for you to lose the only paying work a moron like you can gain, wouldn't it?
Jord had these two exactly where he wanted them. What's more, the threat had worked. Despite the clear difference in size, Din backed down, lowered his head, and mumbled an apology. Jord's expression shifted to a look that radiated superiority. Something else glinted in the midday sun, something much closer to Cal than the sword. A few paces into the alley, a collection of empty bottles lay strewn across the floor, and a few were toppled on top of a wooden crate. Cal watched as Jord continued his tirade against his friends. Taking a fortifying breath, Cal crept forward, ignoring the sting in his side. His pulse spiked at every crunch of stone under his feet. He'd have to hurry, as Jord's admonishments wouldn't last forever.
Now that you know your place again, fan out and search. Call if you see or hear anything. Understand?
George said, his tone full of authority. Bought, not earned. Teston and Din grumbled their responses.
I can't hear you clearly, George said, leaning forward with a hand to his ear.
We understand.
Growled Din. Teston didn't say a word. Grabbing a bottle, Cal crouched while he scampered his way back to the alley junction and nestled himself back around the corner. With one last look at Jord and his men, he threw the bottle as hard as he could in the opposite direction. It soared down the alley and hit the wall with a satisfying crunch.
What was that?
Jord snapped.
Over there! Let's go!
Cal flattened himself against the wall as Jord and his thugs raced past. Making full use of the scant seconds his distraction had bought him, Cal bolted for the sword. His movements were jagged. Pins and needles shot up and down his right side, and he stumbled mid-stride, crashing into one of the rotten barrels. Pain blossomed through his stomach, hot and wet, and the remaining bottles crashed to the ground.
There he is! Get him!
Jord cried, already running back to where Cal was. Cal pushed himself off the barrel, gritting his teeth as he ran. The gnawing pain in his stomach deepened as he raced past the sword. He wanted to take it with him, but it was too heavy, too awkward for him to fumble with. The alley started to look familiar as Cal continued on, the backs of several stores he'd been thrown out of serving as welcome signposts. In the distance, the district gate loomed above the squat buildings. If he could get to the streets, then losing Jordan the busy crowd should be easy enough. Cal dipped out of the alley and pushed into the throng of people. Normally, this many people made him feel uneasy, but for now, they served as welcome camouflage. His heart thundered at the sound of Jord calling out his name. The day had left Cal drained. His side burned, and his fresh change of clothes was sticking to the now soaked through bandage. More than once, Cal's foot slipped as he clambered over the debris pile in front of the hideout. More, more than once, he had to bite back a curse. He risked a glance back into the crowd and grinned at the sight of George shoving people aside and pulling back hoods. With as much stealth as the iron wrought door allowed, Cal snuck into the stairwell. It loomed over him, looking more daunting than ever. Swallowing back the dryness in his throat, he began his climb, one hand on the warped handrail and the other clutching his stomach. For what seemed like an age, he climbed, one foot in front of the other. Each gasp of hot, dry air was like swallowing sand. His chest was burning when he reached the top. The memory of the smoke rising from the orphanage felt distant and unreal as he looked over the city. In the distance, Ignis volcano pulsed orange, red, and hot, its fury reflected in the enormous chain link jutting out of its mouth. On any other day, this glow would have been smooth and consistent, but now it looked different, almost angry. Cal pulled himself away from the sight of it and headed toward the gallery door, toward the dim light coming from within. Inside, Shay leaned against the wall, head tilted as she looked out over the rest of the city. Cal hadn't put much stock in the way others dressed before, typically being far more concerned with whatever or not someone was going to throw, whether or not somebody was going to throw moldy food at him or cuss him out. She wore stitched black pants tucked into thigh-high leather boots and a matching cut-off jacket over a tattered white tunic. She looked fierce, confident, and capable. She looked every inch the fighter Cal aspired to be. "Took you long enough, handsome," she said, grinning as she turned and catching where his gaze fell. "You know, it's rude to stare." "How did you know it was me? I could have been a guard," Cal replied, holding himself as straight as his pride and the radiating pain in his stomach would allow. She chuckled. "Wouldn't be much of a secret spot if any old someone could wander in now, would it?" "And yet here you are," Cal said, playing it cool. She crossed the space and took a seat at the table, gesturing for him to do the same. Good thing I'm not any old someone then, isn't it, Cal? Cal joined her at the table, keeping his eye on her as he tried his best not to limp. Then who are you, really? I told you, she replied. She was close, close enough for Cal to take in her scent, to notice the shock of red in her tightly bound ponytail, and the way her features softened as she leaned forward. I'm the gal who can help you. Not good enough, Cal said, allowing himself to grimace. I'm going to need more than that. You're not a very trusting person, are you? She replied, unperturbed. Cal leaned back in the chair, the pain in his stomach easing somewhat. No. That's going to make working together difficult, she said. Okay, tell you what. You have until dusk to ask me anything you like. We've got some time to kill, after all. What do you mean? It's too dangerous to go wandering the streets during the daytime. I did. Yeah. How'd that go? She said, jabbing Cal's knee with her foot. The jolt sent a fresh wave of pain through Cal's gut. We'll wait here for a few hours. Let the sun go down a bit. Then we can make our move. Where? To Ovette? No, we're not ready for that yet, she said, gesturing at Cal's stomach. I need to make contact with someone first. They're not far. Where? In a safe house. What safe house? Cal asked. One of the many in Igni. She leaned back and propped her feet up on the table. Cal's stomach ached in a different way as dust and small clumps of clay fell onto the old tablecloth. Something the matter? She asked, grinning. Get your feet off the table, Cal uttered. He knew her feet on the tablecloth shouldn't bother him. It was just a thing. But it did bother him. The tablecloth was Ovette's thing. Just making myself feel at home, she said, leaning back even further in her chair. Cal didn't respond, just stared at her. Through her, really. More focused on the memory of Ovette and him sharing whatever meager food scraps they didn't feel guilty about keeping for themselves. Fine, she huffed, if you're going to sulk about it. She stood and wandered back over to the wall, returning to her previous position. Shay, really, why are you here? Why are you helping me? I'm not. She inclined her head toward the streets below. I'm helping them. Cal didn't have to see the people down there to know who she meant. The Davins have us in a cage. A well-designed cage at that. Most of the people down there are happy without ever thinking of the damage that cage causes. The choices that have been taken away from them. She sounded serious, any hint of flippancy gone. It's our job to help them. To free them? No, not free them. We're going to show them the way out. Her tone was softer, and Cal was torn between grinning and the churning feeling he had in his stomach. Torn between voicing agreement or scoffing in reply. Her expression was passive, but her eyes held a certain something in them. Something Cal couldn't quite put his finger on. What about you? She asked, her tone chipper and playful once again. Why are you doing this? The question caught Cal off guard. He thought it obvious why he was here. You already know. I'm getting Ovette back. From what? She asked. What do you mean, from what? From the Davins and their rule. Cal answered with as much venom as he could muster. The Davins rule? You're going to have to be a little more clearer than that. No, I'm not. It was supposed to be Cal asking her questions, not the other way around. Hmm. If you ask me, it sounds like you don't know why you're here. She tapped a finger against her chin, one eyebrow overarched. Good thing I'm not asking you then, isn't it? Cal knew the comeback was weak, but he lacked the energy to care. He wanted to know more about Shay and her operation, but he didn't feel like being interrogated about his own reasons for being here. He was here for Ovette. That was enough. That should be enough. True, true, she said, as she pushed herself off the wall. She made her way over to a stack of cushions in the corner and stretched herself across them, her boots smearing grime across Ovette's careful arrangement. But I'm not the one on trial here now, am I?
What? This some sort of rebellion recruitment speech? Cal balked. You show me the evil of our overlords, and then I vow to do whatever is in my power to bring them down?
Would that be so bad?
Save it. All I care about is getting Ovette back. After that, our little partnership is over.
Ha! Partnership. Cute. She'd made herself comfortable and was now midway through an over exaggerated yawn. That's what this is, isn't it? Cal said. I help you, and you help me? She turned over, rustling against the cushions and propping an arm under her head. Right now, it's more me helping you. But that's okay. Another yawn. Keep watch for a few hours? Consider it the start of your audition for joining us. I already said that when Ovette's back, we're done. I've never said anything about joining you. Uh-huh. Sure thing, tough guy. Cal's lips moved as he tried to think of a follow-up. Something else to say or some other question to ask. What happened to me asking you anything I wanted? All that time we had to kill. As great a conversationalist as you are, I found something more interesting to do. Her words were sluggish and noncommittal. Fine. Have it your way, Cal said, propping his elbows onto the table with a thud. I always do, she replied. Woke as Shay shook him. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but the dim light and lack of noise from the market below told him enough. Rise and shine, she said, as perky as she had been earlier. Wiping the sleep from his eyes, Cal pulled himself out of the chair. His bones ached as he twisted and stretched the sleep out of his body. The pain in his side had lessened, but he was still cautious not to injure himself further. His cheeks flushed at the audible grumble from his stomach. Don't worry, I'll get you something to eat at the safe house, Shay said, smiling with peculiar sincerity. Hope you like military rations. Never tried 'em. Trust me, you might prefer it that way, she said, gathering up her gear. Oh, and by the way, you're terrible at keeping watch. Cal rolled his eyes and made his way over to the crack in the wall, still shaking the last vestiges of sleep from his limbs. Hues of fiery orange and purple washed the sky as the sun crept out of view. Mottled gray clouds cast the ground in large patches of shadow, making it difficult to see what was below. Ready to go? Shay called out from behind him. With one last look at the great chain, Cal followed her out along the wall and headed back down to the street. Outside, Shay clambered with ease over the pile of debris and rubble. When she reached the top, she spun on her heel and offered her hand. Up you come, she said, making no attempt to hide her smugness. I can manage, Cal grunted, hauling himself up as fast and as gracefully as he could. Shay watched his progress, never taking her hand away or changing her expression. You know, you're going to have to start relying on me at some point. We're in this together, right, partner? Cal stopped, stared back into her smirk smiley face. So, we are partners? Wow. Is it always going to be like this with you the whole time? Hesitating, Cal took Shay's hand, allowing her to pull him up the rest of the way. His teeth clenched on reflex, though whether it was from the stab of pain in his side or the wound to his pride, he couldn't tell. Shay moved fast and quiet, the crunch of gravel beneath her feet muted. Cal tried his best to emulate her deftness, but by comparison, he was a parade. He bit back an inward curse, deciding to ask her for instructions later. Such skills would be useful if he was going to get Ovette out of wherever the Davins were keeping her. After a few minutes, Shay held up a hand, either not noticing or not caring about the noise Cal was making. What? Why have we stopped? Cal whispered. Guards, by the gate. She pointed ahead, her finger indicating the two guards that were barely visible in the dim light. Okay, Cal said. What's the plan? She took a moment, craning her neck from left to right. I can see the guard post, but I can't make out what's inside from here. We're going to have to get closer, she said, her eyebrow arching once more. How sneaky are you feeling? As much as I need to be, Cal replied. That's the spirit. She beamed. How she could smile at a time like this was beyond Cal, but he was beginning to realize that most of the things that made Shay tick were beyond someone like him. Keep low and move fast. Try to match my footfalls, okay? It'll help with the noise. Easy, right? Cal's heart began to thud, the sound thumping in the base of his ears. No killing. The words were out of his mouth before he'd finished thinking of them, and he suddenly found himself wishing the pit in his stomach would just swallow him whole. It took a few seconds for her to answer. Only if I have to. With a wink, Shay crept forward at speed, her arms tucked into her side. She made it to the guard post entrance just as the nearest guard passed his gaze her way. If she had been a second slower, she watched, waiting for the guard to look the other way again. The moment he did, she activated her brand. A muted gray began to shift and form living shadows. The shadows coiled around her fingers and coalesced in her palm, formless. With an odd flicking gesture, they leapt from her hand and latched themselves to the guard's temple. They looked alive as they snaked across his eyes. The guard never reacted, seemingly blissfully unaware. Without taking her eyes off the guard, Shay gestured for Cal to join her by the wall. The jolt and soft thump of each step poked Cal just enough to cause discomfort. His chest felt light as he came to a halt next to her. What was that? Cal whispered. I've never seen gift like that before. She appraised him with the same shit-eating grin, only now it was accompanied by a tilt of her head. You're so adorable, she whispered back. Still crouched, she reached up a hand and gently pushed open the door, welcomed by the throaty snores of a guard inside. Shay edged her way inside, signaling for Cal to follow. The wooden floorboards of the guard room soaked up any noise their footfalls made, save for a slight creak. Something in front of the guard caught Cal's eye. A stack of papers that had been strewn across the top of the desk. As he crept by, his eyes fell upon the etching of an old man. It was clipped to the top of a small bundle of pages. Cal's heart leaped into his throat as he read the name at the top. Lephestus. His hand reached forward. He couldn't stop himself. Below the name, he saw a description fitting that of the orphanage. Old building, multiple repairs over the course of occupation. home to runaways and dissidents. Report any activity to Lord Inquisitor Gregorin. Lord Inquisitor Gregorin. Was that the same man who'd taken Ovette away? Cal focused on the picture of Leif, his vision tunneling. He looked younger, his hair shorter, cropped and well maintained. No hint of stubble across his smooth chin. And his eyes, even in the etching, they were cold, piercing. A strange symbol had been stamped on into the top right corner. It looked like part of a spire with something metallic wrapped around it. Cal! Shay's sharp whisper tore Cal away from the pages. She looked right at him, her eyes looking similar to Leif's in the etching. Cal looked back, the now awake guard's confused expression taking stock of Cal and Shay. Things happened too fast for Cal to keep up with. The guard shifted in his seat, attempting to stand. His hand went to his side, grasping the hilt of his sword. His mouth opened. His words gargled in his throat, and he coughed up blood as a small dagger found purchase. The guard slumped back in his chair, his eyes open and looking straight at Cal, accusing him. Cal spun, forgetting himself for a moment. Shay still had one arm extended. The buoyancy of her personality had vanished from her expression, replaced with ice-cold determination. She crept over to the guard, put one hand on his cheek, and pulled out the dagger with the other. Cal flinched as blood spurted from the hole. Shay moved on, bolting the door they had just come through in time. The small iron bar jostled as the guard outside pushed.
Hey, Svenna! Open up! Svenna!
Shay didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She ran through the other door, out into the stokes, abandoning all pretense of stealth. Cal chased after her, moving away from the sound of the guard's shouts and the cracking of wood.
What the? Svenna! Svenna! After them!
The cries of the guards faded as Cal and Shay sprinted through the stokes. Cal struggled to keep up. Shay moved with speed, dipping and darting between the few who remained out this late at night, evidence that this wasn't the first time she'd had to make a quick exit from a crime scene. Cal's stomach groaned at the fragrant spices and the bubbling of flavored oils in the main square. He'd been here a few times with Ovette, wandering from stall to stall, all the while promising her that he wouldn't pinch any of the bric-a-brac that was on display. Trinkets of unknown use, but they would have looked so good in the hideout. This was the area for the wealthier people of the district, the people Cal usually tried to avoid.
Shay!
Cal panted, not daring to slow down despite the pull of his muscles.
Where are we going?
We're close.
Keep up,
Shay replied. Her words clipped, joyless, annoyed. A stitch added to the burn in Cal's side. His feet felt clumsy, and it became more and more difficult to put them where he wanted them to go. He couldn't take much more. He felt like he was seconds away from collapsing.
Stop!
Cal almost ran into Shay as she pulled to a halt. She was looking up at one of the biggest houses he'd ever seen. The outside looked as big as the orphanage, and then some. Cal had to do a double take to make sure it wasn't connected to any other house in the street. Though upon quick inspection, it became clear that this house, this mansion, was the street. The white stonework was precise, not a soot mark or smear on any of it. Each brick was cut into even lines. It didn't have any of the uneven bricks that needed extra clay cladding to cement them together. Shay stepped toward the front entrance, a large set of wooden doors inlaid with iron spirals and floral-like patterns. She rapped on the door with impatience. A few moments later, the door swung open, the light from inside blinding Cal.
Ah, Shay, you're here. Father was beginning to worry that you wouldn't make.
The light faded, and Cal stared into the face of the last person he wanted to see.
What in the flames is he doing here?
spat a flustered Jord.